Hello everybody, I'm O.R.B and I make minis in HeroForge. This week's mini that we are looking at is Tyranny from Critical Role's Campaign 4, which is run by Brennan. Tyranny is played by Whitney and I've really enjoyed the soldier stable and their antics, and I started focusing on Tyranny, and my thought was, can I make Tyranny in HeroForge? And as it turns out, I could. Let's go back in time and see where it started. This was the absolute first attempt that I did for Tyranny. I already had like this sort of a skirt in mind for making Tyranny, and I was also just checking if we can like have the eyes, have the bubblegum and so on. And whenever you are working on a difficult project like Tyranny here, the most important thing is to start in HeroForge with the most difficult parts to make, because if you cannot make the most difficult parts of the mini, the entire mini just kind of falls apart. And the most important thing about creating existing characters that have like a reference to them is to make sure that you get that sort of a feeling that like when you look at the character, you instantly recognize it as Tyranny. We are basically at the very beginning of our journey here, and you know, this so far is not Tyranny. Here I was testing the colors, and still, when I looked at Tyranny here, she didn't look like Tyranny, right? And you know, as I was working on Tyranny, I guess this part shows that she doesn't really have a brain, but you know, that's not important that she doesn't have a brain right now, because she will get it like later, you know? So yeah, if you were worried about that empty head, we just basically covered it up, you know, with this turban. And this was like one of the first challenges, and it was like, can I make this sort of a look? You know, and Tyranny passed here, so it was all good. The other thing that I looked at was if I could make the hair. And when I added this tail here, I started seeing Tyranny, you know? And I thought to myself that, yeah, it is actually possible to make Tyranny. Now this is the part where I was starting to think about the pose and like what she's supposed to be doing. Whitney does a lot of times with Tyranny that she eats fingers or eats some other body parts, you know, mostly fingers. So I was thinking maybe I could make like Tyranny eat a finger or something like that. And I suppose the idea here is, as you can see, Tyranny is going to be eating fingers. Maybe she found some hand that is like all bloody and stuff and she's about to consume it. And I figure maybe this is a sort of a situation where she was about to eat a hand, but then like somebody disturbed her, so she had to put on her orderly appearance. All of this kind of just came in together because I was playing with this tail and I wanted this tail to poke out a little bit. And when I did that, it also increased in height this part specifically. So I thought this could be something that Tyranny could grab onto, so it was kind of like a... sometimes just posing in HeroForge is about the happy accident, so... Now in this part I was testing if I could make the dress, you know? And I was just putting this together, and yeah, like the most difficult part about Tyranny is the dress. The way I made it is out of multiple skirts. Here I was seeing if I could make the thingy that she has around her neck. I thought this was like, this iteration of it was like good enough. But then I went back and changed it into something different. And here I believe is also when I kind of managed to nail the look that Tyranny is supposed to have. I suppose we've never really talked about Tyranny's Steve and what they look like, because she kind of has like a goatly appearance of a demon, and I don't think that goat demons necessarily have like herbivore teeth, especially if she's more like a humanoid goatly creature, you know. I figure she would have like some sort of sharp demonic teeth or something like that. Just so that you can see what kind of the process of like making this sort of a thing is. These are like all the points that you work with when you have a skirt. So whenever I grab like, for example, this point right here, and I edit it anyways, for example, when I move it to the left, it moves like all the points beneath it. And this point right here connects to this point, and each point like connects to the one that it's like neighboring next to him. The other thing is that whenever you are like editing like this, if you go one lower, then this point is not going to get edited. Yeah, and this is just kind of like the most important thing about like when you are editing or kit bashing your model with skirts, just this sort of a rule. When you move something up here, you move everything. Whenever you move something lower, you move everything below it, right? So best to make your edits starting from the top, and that's gonna be like much better for you than just doing it chaos style, I guess. Another thing that you should also know about skirts is, for example, if we take this skirt right here, and this skirt is added essentially with the clothing. If you go to the legs and then you add like one of the skirts from this section, you know, you are able to actually edit it, and that's like really good thing in HeroForge. So when I grab like this skirt right here, you have like 1 million points. But all of these points kind of go around the, let's say, the spine of the model are the skirts, are the part of the skirts that you are actually able to edit. And if we take a look, you know, this skirt used to be a little bit lower. It's because I put it up a little bit higher. I can show you in a previous model. This is what the skirt kind of looks like. So when you don't have kit bashing, it kind of sucks to work with this because it really just doesn't look great. But if you do have kit bashing, then what you are able to do is grab this point right here, and then you can like whoop, plonk it up, and then you can put it inside of the clothes, you know. And you can do this like with all of the points, you know. And this is just kind of like what I did, and just by me like putting all of these points like higher up and just like making sure that they are inside of here and that they are not like poking out of the model, and just by doing that I was able to create a more appealing skirt. Of course, because of that I had to also then change the tail and the hand later, but you know, the most important thing was that the skirt was looking great. If you look at official Tyranny art, she doesn't exactly have colors in this order, but it doesn't necessarily matter because we are not trying to make like an exact replica of Tyranny. If that's what we are trying to do, then we shouldn't be using HeroForge. We should be using like a different program and start from scratch there. Here we are using HeroForge, and in HeroForge's case we are trying to use like whatever is best for the situation. And if you see here, if I grab like for example this white color here and I try to put it here, like this part under the skirt doesn't look as great. I very much prefer like the darker color in this area for the sake of what you see underneath the skirt. I also added the tongue. Whitney mentioned that Tyranny has a forked tongue. And yeah, I managed to also finish this part right here, so it was time to start on the bottom skirt. I started experimenting with one of the skirts. This was like a complete nightmare to do in HeroForge. Like I said, you know, when you like move them around, it doesn't look as great as you want them to look like. Yeah, it was a kind of a struggle here, but this was kind of the start, and I didn't want like this part right here poking out. I just wanted like this part below this to be like more accurate, I guess. I decided to split this skirt into two parts. I decided to make one part from this and the other part from this. You can kind of see here the vision. I put this skirt, but I put it here. So this is just like one of them. If we like take it outside, it looks like a complete abomination. But it works. So that's the most important thing, that it actually works. Then I started working on the back here, as you can see. Started putting it inside. Just the back side. I believe I wasn't satisfied with how things were looking at this point, so I believe I just reset my progress and went back to the start. Sometimes, like, when things don't work out, you just have to go back and fix it. Yeah, and you can see here another skirt, right? It's the same sort of a situation, just like here. Yeah, it looks terrible inside the model, but who cares what it looks like inside the model when it looks great on the outside? It doesn't matter what you are on the inside, it matters what you are on the outside, you know? Then the next thing I was thinking about was how I'm gonna do like the sort of frolics? I don't know if I should call it frolics. It's like the thingies that Tyranny has in her official art. She has like more layers than this, but these two things that we are looking at here are essentially more skirts. So yeah, this model is just a complete skirt nightmare. I was also just trying to do it with like one skirt, but it didn't look as good and I really didn't like it. And here was another attempt, but it just didn't look, it really did not look great. You can see here that in the end I used this skirt, and I also managed to put this skirt, which is another separate skirt, as you can see here. So it's a lot of skirts. I also changed up the color scheme here to break it up a little bit more. One thing I changed about Tyranny, at first I thought maybe it could be a fun idea to put her in some sort of a space of Candescent Crete, maybe like one of their villas or something like that, maybe a temple, you know, and make her part of that scenery. But I was kind of inspired by their trek through the forest with the undead. So I kind of made the area busy with some bones, with some rocks, you know, stuff like that. I also didn't mention Tyranny's jewelry. All of this jewelry that is made with kit bashing, and all of these are essentially earrings, which were like downsized to make a sort of make an illusion of a heart. So this right here is actually a droplet. This is also a droplet. This here is also a droplet, and this here is also a droplet, and all of these are like tied to this metal stick, let's say. The earring that was added here is also kit bash, because when you put jewelry in a non-kit bashed way in HeroForge, it doesn't really look great, because the jewelry is usually like way too big and it looks more like a caricature rather than actual jewelry. So if you're doing jewelry, I 100% recommend kit bashing for that. So as I was saying, I thought I could do like a much better job than whatever I had here. This is, I believe, just like 3 neck pieces put together, you know? And I thought maybe I could make like something a little bit more Tyranny accurate. And I managed to do that with, guess what? More skirts. This is another skirt, and this is another skirt. So it's just, the entire dress is made out of skirts. Another thing that I thought could be fun to to add to the model is to make it a little bit more gory, and you know, maybe it would be a whole lot more fun if there was like some blood going down her arm as she has her like finger snag. And then I also added like something that resembles, I believe this is like a horn, and it's supposed to resemble a bone. But then I realized, but hang on a second, we have 2 bones here, not 1, so I had to add another one. So this is where I rectified that mistake. So this is supposed to be like sort of an illusion of 2 bones out of the hand, you know, and some blood. I considered putting the blood also on the skirt, but the skirt looked really nice, so I kind of just didn't want to ruin it. So I just kind of like gave just slight detail here that it's starting to seep into the dress a little bit, and that's about it, you know. And another thing that I wasn't quite satisfied with was this tail right here. This is a heart. I felt like the shape of it didn't quite look as to what Tyranny had in her official art, so I changed this up. And instead of 1 heart, I just simply used 2 hearts to make it look a bit more accurate. One thing that I was thinking about were also the nails, because technically speaking, Tyranny does not have this long of nails in her official art. She has more of this size nails. So the thing was that I really like these sort of like long demonic nails, but also to make it like a bit more like the official Tyranny, I decided to put this size of nails on this one, and with a compromise I kept this size of nails on this hand. Maybe she has like retractable claws. We know that Tyranny is able to summon some claws as her weapon. We don't know if it is like an actual claw weapon, you know, or if it is her hand that grows the claws, you know. So I don't know, I thought it could be like a fun thing to have these big claws. I don't usually get a lot of chances to use these, so they are kind of like fun to use on a demon. This is also the part where I fixed the eye makeup on Tyranny. You know, I thought this was a more of an accurate representation of what she had in her official art. If you take away this, we can see that it looks like a complete abomination. Hopefully she doesn't look like this in the world of RMR. Another thing that I struggled with were also just like these freckles that Tyranny has, because technically speaking, Tyranny only has like these freckles kind of in this area. So what I had to do is I put as one layer this here, and on top of that I put a different layer of decal. If let's say we try to color it here, yeah, I essentially used this war paint to cover up a lot of the freckles to be a little bit more accurate. And you can see here, I kind of did the same thing there. Another thing that I struggled with were the decals. I wanted to give her that Candescent Creed logo as she has it on her shoulders. And I felt this decal was like the most accurate thing that I could have put. There is like another decal which has like sort of a sun motif, which I also could have used, but like, I think it's fine. I think it's like, it's good enough, you know? It doesn't necessarily have to be 100% accurate, especially if HeroForge doesn't allow you to make like custom decals that you could add. And I also wanted to add a decal here, but whenever I try to like put a decal on this side right here, because this skirt is like so stretched out, the decal just looks incredibly blurry on this, so it was just not worth it. And I think in this case like less meant more. And for the final details, I just added like some sticks here and some sticks here just to make the environment a little bit more lively. And here is what Tyranny looks like when we pick the entire model apart, you know. Let's count the skirts. So here's one skirt, here's a second one, here's a third one, here's a fourth one, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth. So Tyranny is made out of 9 skirts. So there you go. As for portrait, I just kind of added like the bubblegum pink color that contrasts with the color of the teal that Candescent Creed has, and I also just wanted to add some sort of an imagery of light. Alright, that's it for the Tyranny. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to see more content like this, I recommend you to exercise your free will, and I'm really happy how this model turned out. If you want to check it out yourself, there's gonna be a HeroForge link to Tyranny in the description. And yeah, thanks for watching, take care, and bye bye.